Hello and welcome to the Madecast, the official podcast of the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment, a series of lectures on video game history as part of the Made's ongoing effort to preserve history through teaching and displaying playable exhibits of rare games and consoles.
While life in the time of COVID has forced us to close our doors, the support of people like you has allowed us to continue to bring history to you through lectures and interviews like the one you hear in a few minutes. I'm Chun.
I'm Anthony.
I'm Miles.
And I'm Red. This week, Alex meets up with Keith Nemitz, this time to chat with Josh Mandel, one of the producers of Freddy Pharkas, Frontier Pharmacist. They get deep into the weeds on that game development, working at Sierra, and then go into what games they're currently playing. But before we get into that conversation, we got a little bit of news to touch up on. So the first thing we got is some New World news, new week, new exploits. There was a gold duplication exploit to allow you to multiply the gold that you have. The most interesting one of these that I saw of other things was a new invulnerability thing. If you just shake your window that you're playing the game in, you suddenly become invulnerable and unable to die. Which it's fantastic. I highly recommend it. It's just playing the game. I'm just playing the game. Okay. It's in the game. It's programmed that way for a reason. And we just get to play it. So that's just, you got to learn how to deal with it. But I don't know. I mean, it's a large MMO thing, and they're going to have tons of issues to deal with a game of this scale.
I don't know if any of the New World team has worked on MMOs previously, but this feels very first game syndrome.
Stinky.
Yeah. Like these are fundamental things that, you know, with a bit more experience and a bit more games under your belt, you'd sort of just say, oh yeah, this is going to be a problem if we do it this way. Specifically, the shaking the game window led into this whole conversation online about whether New World itself is client authoritative, which means that whether the server trusts the client on the player's machine over what's happening on the server. New World devs have said that that's not the case, but it's still a troubling question because that means it's really easy to cheat.
Yeah, and I don't know. This is going into other things with New World at the moment. I've not delved too much time into it. It's okay. I'm not quite at a level where I can get to like any of like the really fun parts of the game yet, but I don't know. I forgot what an MMO was really like in a lot of grinding. If I don't have a set amount of people to like play with, it's not as fun as a solo experience as it would be if you got a lot more people to sync up with and play. But it looks really fun, and I like the gameplay style. It's just very reminiscent of like old school RuneScape for me. But hopefully we'll see more of these issues and bugs fixed, because there are some serious all of these are serious issues that should be fixed in order to make the game a little bit more fair. But in other news, we have Netflix has launched Netflix games on Android. So they started with, I think, 5 mobile games, 2 Stranger Things based ones. One of them is called Stranger Things 1984, which is like a pixelated world where you're just roaming around and everything. And then there's like Stranger Things 3, the game, which I think what they're doing is, I feel like it might be kind of like the same thing as like the Nintendo title Goonies 2, where there was never actually a show released. You just like, oh, this is an interesting new take on the Goonies. I didn't realize that there was going to be a second story to be told.
Looks like all you need is a Netflix membership.
That's going to be a huge thing. I think Netflix is going to be pushing a lot of really insane shows, games rather. For a force that big to be stepping into the games frontier, it's going to be really interesting to see what comes in the future. I mean, everybody else is going to cloud gaming and everything else, streaming games rather than downloading them just ready to play off of somebody else's server, just with a solid internet connection. But before we get into all that, there needs to be a lot more development of more solid internet connections if they want to have the player base for streaming that they wish. So hopefully
if they're originally starting with mobile, I mean, that's the phone company's problem. Like, Netflix doesn't really have to do anything about that.
No. But I'm just saying, if they want to reach, if they're starting on mobile, that's definitely like the phone company's problem. But if they want anyone playing on console or anything, which they hope to get into in the future, then it's going to be, I still feel like the gap in solid internet connection in certain areas is very lacking. Like anywhere that's like close to the internet company is going to have a much more solid connection than anywhere that's a bit away and has still running on like broadband or DSL, because there's no better option for internet around. But again, that does seem to be their problem. It's not quite ours yet until there's something that we want to play. And then last little bit of news that we got is Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4 have been delayed. We were never given a release date, so it's like, I mean, all right, we didn't have a release date, so
yeah, which day we're not hearing bad news from Blizzard these days.
Oh, I know. Blizzard is a very solid company with a good set of core values and no issues at all. So, yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with Blizzard in any way.
When I think of Blizzard games, I really just think of cool trailers now. Like, I don't even really think about the games. Like, I remember Diablo 4's trailer being absolutely amazing. Like, it was super rad. And then I completely forgot about Diablo. And I just started playing Path of Exile instead.
You know, I think if they downscale themselves a little bit to like a CG company, maybe they would make more money.
Mm-hmm. I think they farm out a bunch of the actual CG work for their trailers, but it's just they always do amazing trailers. So,
yep, they really tease you and make you want to play the games. But we'll see what the future holds for Blizzard in other ways. But I think it's time we throw it on over to Alex, Keith, and Josh for their awesome conversation about Freddy Pharkas, Frontier Pharmacist, and working at Sierra back in the day. So, without further ado, here's Alex, Keith, and Josh Mandel.
All right, we are here with Josh Mandel. Thank you for being here, Josh.
My pleasure.
We wanted to start out by asking you how you got started in the industry.
Sure. Well, I got my first computer it was probably around 1985. And I immediately took to adventure games. They were my favorite kind of games, but by no means the only kind of game I played. And after a while, I was wondering, is there any way I can get this software for free? So I eventually found Garuka Singh Khalsa, who was Sierra's producer. I found him on CompuServe, and I asked him if I could beta test for Sierra. And he said yes, and so I started beta testing. And so I started getting my software for free, and this lasted maybe a couple of years. And then one day he calls me and he says, I need a junior producer because I'm doing everything myself. I'm doing all the producing for all the games we're coming out with. And I had a lucrative job in advertising at the time, so I never thought I would give that up to go into full-time software development. But I went out to Oakhurst for an interview, and I was so charmed by Ken and all the people I met there and the work that was being done, which blew me away. And by the environment itself, Yosemite is gorgeous, and I'd never seen anything like it. So one thing and another, I ended up saying yes and moving out to Oakhurst, and that's how I got my foot in the door.
So we had you on here because last week we had Keith Nemitz on and he mentioned doing the Mac port for Freddy Pharkas. And so I decided, since you two probably haven't spoken in many years,
True.
Why don't you two catch up? And Keith?
Yeah. Great to
Hey,
see
Keith.
you. Great to be here, hanging with you again, Josh.
Yeah.
So, my contact with Freddy Pharkas was doing the ports to Macintosh, so I didn't really get my hands on the game until after it had already shipped for PC. But Josh and I had been socializing as part of the Sierra crowd because Oakhurst itself didn't have a lot of artistic sensibility or appreciation for it, I guess. They like the jobs, I guess. I'm just kind of rambling now. Josh, take it from here.
Well, I think it's partly because Oakhurst is so tiny. People at Sierra socialized with each other because they were the only people around to socialize with. Unless you wanted to socialize with the residents of Oakhurst, who, as you say, were not exactly the most artistically inclined. I remember one day seeing the KKK marching on the Planned Parenthood office.
Wow, you were there for that. I'd only heard about it.
Yeah, I passed it in the car, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
Wow. That sounds almost like a conducive environment for making games just because there's nothing else for you to do, though.
Well, we certainly had a lot of artistic crossover. In fact, I remember one point, Josh, you came and we did a reading of a play that I wrote over at my house with a bunch of other Sierra people.
Oh, wow. I don't remember that.
That's fine.
But I believe you.
that script didn't go anywhere, but it was a great moment. It's left definitely as an example of the kind of crossover of ideas and interests and passions.
Yeah, I remember when
How did
Leslie
Freddy Pharkas-
Balfour wrote a show called Hamlet on Rye.
Oh, that was Bruce's that wrote that, wasn't it?
Oh, I thought. Oh, maybe Leslie just directed it.
She directed.
Maybe I'm not remembering correctly.
How did Freddy Pharkas even come to be, if I can sort of put us back on the tracks of the game?
Oh, sorry.
Well, Al was in a meeting with Ken and Roberta in which they were tossing ideas around for his next game, which wasn't to be a Larry game. And I believe Al started to say something like, well, what about a frontier farmer? But he mixed up his words and it came out Pharmacist. And they thought, oh, that's a funny idea. Let's go with that. So Freddy was born that way.
Wow. How is a game was typically started, right? I mean, you've got the writing happened first. Did you deal with some art first? I don't doubt any coding happened until things kind of came together.
Right. Well, Al went off by himself and started designing the game. And he designed the entire first pass at it. And then we started collaborating on fine-tuning it, taking some parts out, adding some new parts. And at the same time that we're doing that, we're already talking to artists. And the artists started sketching characters and locations and things like that. And then once the game was pretty well squared away, I think that's when the programmers came in and started doing their thing.
Yeah, that sounds typical. Was there any moments when the game started to kind of gel in your mind that you definitely had it was definitely in the right direction, heading in the right direction?
I think probably when they introduced me to the message editor and I could start writing actual click events And now I thought, now I'm cooking.
One of the things that I think stands out about the game is that it does have that sort of low touch, but it's not, obscene, I guess would be the words for it. Or it's not always obscene.
I would say the jokes are a little bit more sophisticated, too. The humor is a lot more interesting.
Are you talking about the horse farts in particular? When you say sophisticated?
It's like, it's still got those touches, right? I mean, what was it? Were there times you had to rein it in, or was there any consideration given to the audience? Like, was this not to be the Larry audience, or what was that?
Well, I'll tell you the truth. When I started on the game, I thought, Al has this reputation for doing softcore porn, sort of. And I didn't think it was serving him to be pigeonholed that way. So I was always pushing to make Freddy the least sexual and the least full of toilet humor that I possibly could. But, it's Al's strong suit. And so it came out with plenty of those things anyway.
So, Keith, I believe you mentioned a bug that you had to track down right before shipping on Freddy, right?
This is where I base myself before poor Josh. But the Macintosh version shipped with this horrible bug. It was actually in all the previous bugs. It was all the previous games, but it just seemed to trigger more often in Freddy. And it was an audio bug related to the MIDI driver that had been compiled for the Amiga. And we were just using the compiled code as a linked library into the library for the Macintosh. And it wasn't saving one of the registers that was expected in the environment of the Macintosh, so it would get overwritten occasionally. And that was the bug. It took forever to find it because it was so random. And when we finally did, that was on Freddy that we realized it, and we scrambled to try and find a way to fix it. But the only sure fix would have been to rewrite the entire MIDI driver, and they wanted to ship the game.
I remember that. Didn't you come out with a patch later?
Oh, maybe somebody did, but I don't remember coming out with a patch.
I thought there was a patch, but I might be thinking of something else.
I mean, that must have been one of the most difficult aspects of developing at the time, is the fact that you're building for these different platforms. I mean, DOS and the Mac OS, it's completely different chipsets. I mean, 68,000, the x86, and the Amiga was still kicking around, and, some of these things are getting ported to the CDI eventually. I mean, Keith and I were just listening to the Freddy Pharkas CD DOS version with all the audio recordings, right? I mean, when did you guys decide to record all the audio for it?
Well, by that time, I was on Space Quest 6, so I didn't even know that the audio recording was happening until one day Al calls me up from the studio where they're recording it. And he says, so I'm here recording the voices for Freddy. And I was like, what? I knew nothing about it. And he was calling to tell me that he was sick of recording voices. They had been in the studio for many hours every day for a week and a half maybe. And that was going to be it. And so we were going to end up having to cut about 15% of the text because we weren't going to record the audio for it. And I was pretty bummed by that. A lot of it was the option to click one inventory item on another inventory item. And
I remember that, Josh. That was your masterpiece. You did that spreadsheet where every item had a joke for being paired with any other item. It's just amazing.
What?
Yeah.
Exponential jokes?
I actually have that spreadsheet right here in front of me. Wow. It still exists.
We gotta save that somewhere. We need to put that in a Google spreadsheet.
I can send you a picture of it. It's enormous.
Definitely send a copy to the Video Game History Foundation.
Yeah, we need to get that to Frank.
Oh.
Actually, if you have data, we need to talk after this. So we have to hook you up with Frank.
But the problem with cutting that 15% was that a lot of those messages contained clues. So where they ended up compromising was, I believe you could display the text for those messages, but you couldn't hear them.
See, that sounds fine to me.
I don't know if that ever worked.
Yeah.
Well, think about the original Baldur's Gate. When it shipped, they recorded like the first few voices for the characters, but then they let the text be the primary delivery. So they just had enough to give you a sense of what the voice sounded like. And then they just carried on with just text after that. And it worked. I thought it worked great. I was amazed at that success.
So, Josh, you mentioned Space Quest 6. You got any Space Quest stories? Those seem like fun games to have worked on.
Well, Space Quest 6 was really difficult for me, and the stories of that are legion. I left the company partway through the development of the game because I couldn't stand what was happening with the management. But again, I took whatever environments I had at the time that I left, and I blew them out with messages, particularly the elevator. I forget what we call it, the astropad or something like that. You can click on every square inch of that screen and get a different message.
I mean, that's love, and that's discipline, that's patience. I mean, is that just you? Is that just the Josh Mandel touch?
That's my reaction to the removal of the parser.
The removal of the parser? Okay, so you just fill it up with individual responses.
Yes, because we had taken away the player's ability to really explore in the way they want. So I thought, well, the very least we can do is provide customized responses for whatever the player can try. So all my games, I try to do that.
I mean, it's almost a lost art in this day and age. Keith, when's the last time you saw a game with allowing you a single message for every inventory combination?
Yeah, that's. I have equivalents, but it was definitely a rare thing that happened. There's a lot happening in the interactive fiction space these days. Josh, I don't know if you are following that at all, but there's some amazing work being done right now.
Yes, I know. It's very intimidating.
But if you like parsers...
Right.
So what are you doing these days, Josh?
Well, very little at the exact moment. The last thing I worked on was Summer Days for Corey and Laurie Cole, and that hasn't been released yet. That's sort of a follow-up to Hero U. Hero U is the last big project that I worked on. And that's reflective of my style, because what I was doing was providing the messages for clicking on the backgrounds. And you can click on every painting and urn and suit of armor and get a different joke for each one.
That's wonderful.
And I did work on the demo for Sam and Max, the virtual reality game that just came out for the Quest.
Oh, cool.
But
That's a fun
once the publisher said yes, one of the old writing crew from the original series popped up and said, I would really like to work on this. And so I stepped back and I let him take over. But at least I helped get the project off the ground.
Oh, that's great. Nice, that's great. I mean, yeah. What are you playing these days?
Let me see. What am I playing? I'm playing Doki Doki Literature Club.
Oh, yeah!
Now you got Keith excited. You two could just talk about that for the next time.
Well, I've just been reading about that game, and I I just don't want to go through the horror that apparently it is, as because I've been sticking to a lot of bright and uplifting fare personally through some trying times. So I've been avoiding that actually, but I know about it.
Well, my daughter, I have a 16-year-old daughter, and she was telling me about how horrible it was going to be for me and so on. So when I actually played it, I thought, oh, this is quite a bit tamer than I thought it would be. But they really found a few ways to mess with your head. There's glitches in the game that are purposeful. It really throws you off the track. So I'm playing that. I'm playing Detroit Become Human. A lot of stuff on the PS4 lately I'm playing.
Cool.
So, I mean, Become Human, contrast that with the simple adventure games that simple 2D presentation of the adventure games versus Becoming Human is like absurdly 3D and glistening with rain, and it's such a step forward. But what do you think of the gameplay?
Oh, I really like it. It's very different. I can see how it's the logical extension of the adventure game. It's not something I would want to work on, I think, but I can admire it and enjoy it.
Yeah, there's a number of sort of descendants that have come out of that adventure model, but the real heirs apparent, you can still feel that sort of original soul, the investigative and explorational nature of these games, right?
Right. And I can't imagine how many people it would take to develop something like that, as compared with the Sierra games, where you could pretty much count the members of the team on two hands.
Probably three, wouldn't you think? I mean, there was a lot of artists. The coders were probably 2 or 3 at least. There were maybe 10 artists.
Well,
2 or 3.
Freddy had
2 or 3 coders.
3 programmers and 4 artists.
Oh my goodness! I thought there was a lot more than that. Huh?
Nope.
Okay.
That's incredible. I mean, the amount of game that could be delivered too. I mean, those games are not short.
No, we try to make them as long as possible without making them feel stretched out.
Indeed. And at the time, the going wisdom for making a game last longer was the Nintendo wisdom, where you just make it like really, really, really hard and nobody will ever beat it.
Right.
Which, certainly the Sierra games are not really, 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 really hard, but they could be obtuse and they could be difficult and perplexing, not to say that
I thought Freddy was particularly hard because of the presence of timers. There are several time sequences in the game that I did not think were fair, but forced the player to do a lot of replaying. So that's something I would change if I were making the game today.
That's interesting. Do you remember there was like a classic debate at GDC one year between, I think it was, why do I have to space on her name now? Ken's wife,
Roberta.
Roberta, thank you. And one of the designers from, it might have been Chris Roberts, about character death in interactive fiction. In adventure games. And I can't remember whether Freddy took any clues from that after that or not. But I remember it was a big deal in the among the designers of the gameverse.
I'm not aware of the game being influenced by that, but perhaps Al knew about it, and perhaps his original design was informed by it in some way. One of the pieces of adventure game analysis that did have an effect on the game was Ron Gilbert's famous article, "Why Adventure Games Suck." And excellent. One of his points in that was the whole notion of death in the game. So that's why Freddy has a rewind feature that lets you go back and do things differently without necessarily needing to restore.
Yeah, we didn't even get to touch on the death in games, concept. I wish we had the time. But Josh, Keith, thank you for both being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Absolutely.
We'll find a time and get you back here again soon.
Great.
I'd love to talk with you, Josh, anytime.
Yep, sounds good.
And we're back. Thank you very much, Josh, and Keith, for joining Alex today and having a great conversation. I hope all of you enjoyed that as much as we did, because we enjoyed it. So stop talking about it. In other news, not news, rather, but in other conversation, it's time to brush up on what you guys have been playing recently. Anything new? Anything interesting? Anything fun?
I have been rebooting one of my old Minecraft server together with my old roommates because we missed it, and now we start building again. And
you started building it up, like you started over, or
we keep the old map, and yeah, and we make a map for the server because we just built everything too big. It takes 6 hours in real life to go from one city to another city in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Ow.
And I'm of course I'm not mean walking in the game, but I'm saying like if you take a minecart, we actually build a rail of it, and yeah, we did calculation on one night, and it takes about 6 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
You got to go through
That's
the
a
nether.
large map.
I don't.
Yeah.
I think we built a server like 2 years ago, and I don't remember me being that crazy, but it seems I do. It's really fun rediscovering the old buildings of mine, because sometimes I just forgot about them. I just built too many stuff, and I would be like, hey, I'm doing really good in 2 years ago, and I'm actually surprised by myself, because I never feel the same way when I was building it 2 years ago. I didn't realize how good it is, and yes, so do my friends. They're just amazed by their old buildings, and I think we'll be building more stuff now.
That sounds really peaceful and fun.
Yeah.
As long as you don't have anyone coming in to raid your marvelous place.
Don't worry about it. I'm the GM of the server, so they won't be doing anything.
They can't do anything to me. I am God.
You know, my roommate actually. So there was one night I was sleeping early, and they are just playing in the server, and it seems like they're having a little war on the commands, and when I wake up, I see they nuke an area. So there's like a few thousand dragon eggs in the same places. Like I was thinking, like, hey, I didn't add any mods. Why would there be meteor in this area? In turns out they are all dragon eggs. So we take a few hours using command block to just fix those areas. But those are some good old days. Yeah.
Just massive destruction of a created world.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
But it was fun.
Well, hopefully those dragon eggs will serve a better purpose in the future, rather than being bomb fodder. But well, that sounds like a grand old time. I wish you luck on restarting the server and making your cities a bit closer together. I think an hour to get to another city may be like a good goal to get to.
I don't know where.
Allow your cities to be big enough.
You just got to figure out where each one is, and then go into the nether and use rail carts
We
or
did it
railways
already.
in the nether.
It takes
You already
less,
did that?
but it still takes about an hour.
Ugh.
That's just how far it is. We are like about. It's more than thousands. Just more than thousands.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
How could you cut down on that time?
I don't know. I must be very.
There's got to be some way.
I must be very dedicated. I didn't build it alone. Let's say.
Just enable God mode so you can just fly through.
There are just multiple people in the world, and
yeah.
Sometimes they will build something amazing, and I never realized it.
I can never see it. It'll take me 8 hours to find your beautiful structure.
Yeah.
I just got to hold forward on my controller and go as far as I possibly can. Like use the rubber band trick. So you put it on your controller or just set like a weight on the W key and then allow yourself to go to sleep and wake up, hopefully at your destination. But that's exciting and all, but I think it's about time that we wrap it up for everybody today. We want to thank you for listening to the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment's official podcast. If you have any thoughts, questions, corrections, or general museum ideas, please shoot us an email at info@themade.org.
We'd like to send out a big thank you to everyone who donated recently, and to our patron supporters who keep the Made afloat. Patron donors get to listen to this podcast 1 week before it's released on major streaming services, and we continue that with future episodes every week.
This week's episode was brought to you in part by Patreon donors Nate Buck and Delata. Thanks so much for your support.
Thank you very much. Until next week, I'm Red.
I'm Miles.
I'm Chin.
And I'm Anthony. Thanks. We'll see you next week.
Later, gamers.